Hey everyone, and welcome back to the next Python tutorial. In this one, we're going to be talking about class inheritance. And the way you can think of class inheritance is you pretty much make a base class that has some attributes or methods, or attributes and methods, and then you make a new class that inherits everything about the base class and also adds its own stuff to it. So one of the things you can do is make like a base class and have you can have another class inherit everything from it, and then you can have another class inherit everything from it. But the two what we call concrete classes at the bottom of the tree have their own. They're very unique from each other, but they both inherit stuff from the parent base class. I'll try and type some code here, and hopefully you'll understand it a little bit better. But the way I'm going to teach this is I'm going to make a class called a character. We're going to treat this like it's like a character in a video game. We have our base character class, and then we're going to have a character class, and that's going to be our base class. And from that, we're also going to make a player class, which has everything a character does, plus more stuff, because the player will have like actions it can do. It'll have health and lives and things like that. And then we're also going to have like an NPC class, which will inherit from the character class. So it'll have everything a character can do as well, but it'll have its own like NPC specific stuff, like I don't know, a list of dialogue options or something. I'll figure it out as we type it, but I'll go ahead and we'll start it here. So let's make our base character class. So you start by typing the word class, as you saw in the previous tutorials. We're going to call it character. We'll do our constructor method, and we'll say the only thing a character needs is a name. So you'll have to pass in a name and assign it to the name variable. Now, do we want to give the base character class any methods? I'm going to say no. So that's really all a base character class is. It just has a name. It's a character with a name. And then what we can do, we can make our player class, which will have a name as well. So we'll inherit that from the character class, but we'll also give him like lives, like he'll have 3 lives. He'll have health, so we'll say his health is equal to 10. And then he'll have his own methods. So let's go ahead and type that up. So we'll make another class called player. And this is how you inherit. So immediately after the player class name, you'll put open close parentheses, and you can type in what other class you want to inherit from. So we want to inherit from the character class. And then you put the colon right after the parentheses. And you still give it a constructor method. And in right after the constructor method, oh, I forgot to type in self. And we still have to give them a name, so we actually have to put name in here as well. All right, so this part's a little confusing at first, but inside the constructor method for the player class, you have to write code that will know how to run the constructor method for the character class as well. And there's a few different ways you can do this. The way I'm going to show you, it's going to look confusing at first, but this is kind of how I do it, and I'll type the code and then explain what it's doing. So when we create a player object, it's going to inherit everything from the character class. And when we make a player object, it's going to run its constructor method automatically, just like all the previous class videos I've showed you. And inside its constructor method, it's going to use this super method that all classes get. What the super method does, it's called super because it's going to access the base class. A super, you could think this is the class on top of the player class. So it's going to access the character class of the player class. That's why you have to pass the word player in there. And you also just know you have to put the word self in here, and it has to be the second parameter. So we're going to access, all this says is we're going to access this character class up here and run its constructor method to set it up as well. So just by doing that, it should give us our name that all characters have. And we also have to pass name in here, because if we're running the character's constructor method that's up here, it requires a name. So that name that we're throwing in here gets thrown into here, and it sets our name up for us. And now we want to give the player class all the extra stuff that a player gets. So he'll get things like health, and we'll just assign it 10. We'll have like lives equals 3, and we'll make like a Boolean value for, I'm just making a bunch of stuff up right now, but we'll make a Boolean value for like if the player is currently alive or not. So it's like a state he can be in, depending if we want to like trigger certain events in the game that we're making. And true, he is alive. And then you can give the player his own methods as well. So we can make one called attack. For right now, we'll just make it say print. We'll make it print his name. And it says he attacks. And then we can make one called like death or something. And this is where we would set like the... This is where we could set the is alive variable to false. And you can go on and make all your different stuff, but the point is, because we threw character, we made a player class and threw character in these parentheses right here, it means it's going to inherit everything the character class has. So really all we said was it includes a name, but we can also do like description, and it just equals an empty string, and later on you can go down here and say self dot description equals whatever. You don't really need to do that, because that doesn't really do anything. Self dot description, that's not a good example. Just ignore that I did that one. But pretty much anything you type up here in the character class, any variables you give them, any methods you give the character, the player will also get as well. But what we can do is also make another class, and we'll call it like NPC, and it'll inherit from a character. So we'll do all the same exact things. We'll have to pass in a name. We'll run our super method. And we'll pass in name. But we'll say NPCs can't attack. They can't die. They're just kind of characters you talk to on the map. So we'll say they have like self dot text. They get like a text variable. It's like what you say, or what they say if you go talk to them. And we'll actually do this, because every NPC will have different dialogue text. So what we can say is when you create an NPC, you not only have to give them a name, you have to give them some text. And we can just assign that text right here to the text variable that NPCs get. And then the method that an NPC can have can be talk. We'll make one called talk, and then it'll just print whatever you passed into. Well, we'll print their name, and then immediately after print the text. All right. So those are all our classes up at the top. Now what I want to do at the bottom, I want to go ahead and make a player. So we'll just make a player object. And we have to give them a name, so we'll just call them hero for right now. And then we'll make a NPC object. So I'll just say NPC1 equals an NPC object. And an NPC requires if you go up here, they require a name and text. It's like what they say if you talk to them. So we'll say this is Bill is his name, and his text, he just says, hey, my name is Bill. And we can do, we'll just say player.attack to show you the player's attack method that we made. And right after he attacks, we'll do the NPC object that we made, we'll do his talk method. So if we run this, the player it should say self.name attacks. And remember, in this player class up here, we never made self.name, and that's because he inherits self.name from this character class up here. So let's go ahead and run this. And I made a typo. So let's see. Where did I mess up? Player self. Oh, sorry. In this the super method I did on NPC, I put the player class, but this is actually the NPC class. So I got to change that to NPC. The first argument that the super method always takes is the name of the class that you're in. So right here it was NPC, and right here it's player for the player class. There, so hero attacks, and it knows his name is Hero, and then Bill says, hey, my name is Bill, and it knows his name is Bill, and it got all the name information it got from this character class up here. This is a really simple kind of example, but pretty much you can have, I could have given this character class like 20 things that all NPCs, enemies, and players get in the game, and then make a player, NPC, and enemy class that inherit from the character class, and just the player, NPC, and enemy classes themselves get all the extra stuff that only those classes would have. And you can actually just daisy chain classes like as many as you want. You can make like a stat. I call it static entity when I make a game. But you can make like a static entity class, which just contains like an image and it'll contain like an image and coordinates, and then I'll make like a dynamic entity class which has all that stuff plus like an animation object that can control animation, and then off of that you make a player class that inherits from dynamic entity, which has all the stuff that static entity, dynamic entity, and the player class has, plus like health and lives and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll eventually go into Pygame and actually make a full-blown game, and you'll see me use inheritance a lot. It really helps you organize your code, and it's very helpful to learn to use. But yeah, that's pretty much it on class inheritance.